Okay, guys, so welcome to Africa's Talking. This is our first podcast. So we're very excited. We did one actually. We did one podcast almost 2018 or something. But then now we want to really focus on this process and tell the stories of our customers. So maybe we can just begin with introductions. Today we have the founders of Canza Finance. On their site, canza.io, they state they are the future of Web 3.0 and African decentralized finance. Yes. So maybe you guys can, who wants to go first?
I think I'll go first.
Yeah.
My name is Pascal Sama. Actually, the last name is Ntsama. I could not pronounce that name growing up. It's the Nt is kind of silent. But I'm originally Cameroonian. Okay. Mom and dad are Cameroonian. Okay. Grew up in Cameroon until age 12 when we migrated out of the US through a lottery process back then. Oh, nice. So my mom, we left her dad back in Cameroon and migrated to the US for the greater goods of things, right? And I went straight into high school education. And that's kind of like secondary level education. In Georgia, in the United States. And I went to a pretty interesting school. Actually, I went to school with, I think his name is Amino Al-Farouk. He's an NBA player. Oh, so wow, the school nice. is really popular. My high school, Norcross High School, very popular for like basketball players. Jeremy Lamb came out of our high school as well. Nice. Jody Mix and a few other NBA players. Okay. So I already felt like there was greatness, right, happening around us. Even then, they weren't NBA players, but there were just a lot of prospects. In high school, I was just focused on learning everything, right? The culture was new to me, so it was not so much challenging because I feel like in our generation, we didn't have access to the internet per se, but we had access to like enough TV, enough series to understand what is life like in the United States, right? That's so for me, it was just leveraging all those things that I knew before, right? And learning my environment. So I wasn't necessarily like attracted to anything at that point. Technology wasn't at the core of my focus. If anything, it was playing video games. So I just enjoyed playing video games. But from then on, I graduated from high school and went to Georgia Tech.
Now that's serious.
Yeah, it's still in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I guess with Georgia Tech, I just applied to most of the top programs in Georgia and got accepted. And
so you're a smart guy, man.
Yeah. I think that was also one of the indications that I was smart, right? Because you know how African families are, they don't want to boost you up a lot.
Okay.
They want you to keep working hard. And, when I got into tech, I was like, hold on, I'm actually smart. And got into tech, I think I wanted to do mathematics and then I discovered like, what would I actually do with math, right? There isn't so much avenues for, I guess, a mathematician, at least then when I was making the analysis. So I decided to go with electrical engineering. Started electrical engineering. It was actually very, very, they have a very challenging electrical engineering program. Back then, it was separate from computer engineering, but I believe right now is kind of the same. So they take a lot of similar courses with a few different developer courses that the computer engineers take. So it was a really challenging program. So I spent my first 2 years, my first year especially, like just locked in on trying to survive tech. It's like something at tech, like so like Hunger Games or something. It's like because you're in your high school, you're used to being like, number 3, and then you walk into a room and you're number
last
30.
Crazy.
All right. So it's like very challenging up front. But I decided, you know what, let me not just spend my whole time at tech just going through school. Let me get involved, right? And I started getting involved with something called Engineering Without Borders. They were actually doing a project back in Cameroon, right? That got my attention. But I usually just support them with a little bit of logistics on like what is Cameroon like. It's a French and English speaking country, what to expect, so on and so forth from a cultural standpoint. But then I also got into a research program, right, where like as an undergrad, they pair you with like world-renowned professors and their PhD students, and you can start working on some projects, some research projects. And I worked on a project that was in the first project was in the electric vehicle space, and that actually got some recognition from IEEE. And the second project,
Which year was this?
this was 20, I would say around 20, I would say 2010 to 2013.
That's quite early in the game, man.
Yeah. And exactly, I think then the first model was just out of the Tesla. GE was doing some stuff with electric vehicles, but a lot of things were in the lab, right?
Okay.
There were very few electric vehicles in the market. They were quite expensive, and the technology was quite new, right? There weren't so much like imagery, self-driving, all those things. Exactly. They were kind of like future products. The focus was how do we build a system that is energy efficient, right, and durable and sustainable for most drivers. I don't want to go too much into the details of the research because I think I'll bore the people, the audience. But I also did the research in IoT, which is quite interesting. And I remember the first time they were explaining the research to me, they told me, just imagine playing your video game, right? But you never have to charge your controller. Your controller is charged wirelessly, and your controller communicates with a console, and the console is connected to your TV. So I'm talking about like this is probably like 2011, right? Most consoles then there was like between the controller and the console there was a so it wasn't wireless, right? So I was like, wow, this is really interesting. But I could extrapolate that across many other types of like solutions.
Yeah.
And that got the attention of AT&T. My final year when I was graduating, they were amazed I worked on such a project. Brought me on to work for one of their headquarters teams that was focused on basically deploying 5G across the US and also what they call indoor networks, right? Like stadium, big venues, they need their own networks. So I was part of that team. Worked there for about, I would say 5 years. That's where I met Deji. And we just met early on. He was from Nigeria. I'm from Cameroon. So
neighbors.
Yeah, and I
with
think
the competition for the food, the
yeah.
sauce, and,
this is
and
like
the rice.
this is like post Davido, right? This is post Davido. We're in Atlanta, so it's cool to be African, right? And we're in this company, and we have things in common that we could talk about, even as side work. So we just kicked it off.
Nice.
And from there on, I think Deji and we decided to start a few ventures very, very early on. I would say probably we did maybe 20 or maybe 30 different things.
Yeah.
Some of them were like consulting projects, right? Like, for example, we had a consulting company that we really did just one project, but that project was very interesting. There was an investor in London that was looking at getting into the Brazilian market, and he wanted us to do a SWOT analysis and about the fintech space in Brazil. So essentially, we collected a lot of data, sent him a report. And what was funny about that exercise was he had contacted a few MBA grads to do the same. And apparently, our analysis was what he went with. So that's
good.
That
was
happens
like
a lot, actually.
Yeah, that was an indication to us that, like, you know how I had the indication when I was in tech that, hey, I'm smart. And Deji and I were like, hey, we can go against like
The
top
big
MBA
guys,
guys, right? And the customer actually takes what we produce. So I think that was kind of like the early phases of us forming Canza Finance, because like obviously finance is such an important part of society, right? Like if access to finance and quality financial services are not available, it hinders a lot of other aspects of life, right? So at that moment, we started to zoom in more and more into finance, right? And we started to realize the issues that we had back home and also opportunities, right? With every issue, there's an opportunity, be it remittance, be it savings, be it lending and borrowing.
Yes.
And it just so happened we're completing kind of like, I would say, an internal Shark Tank that AT&T did.
Okay.
We submitted an idea to basically leverage blockchain technology, which at the time Deji was doing his master's thesis on, to facilitate remittance between the US and Mexico, right?
Nice.
And that got into the process, and the final part of it is you get a direct review with all of the VPs of the company. And at that time, I had left AT&T to go to another. I was chasing money, so I'd left to go to T-Mobile, and Deji was still at AT&T, so he had to go pitch to all of the VCs alone, right?
Yeah.
And so that got accepted into the program. It got rolled over to AT&T Labs for further review, and we just looked at ourselves and said, you know what? We've gotten so much assurance, right, or reassurance that this is what we're supposed to do and we have the capabilities to do it. Let's start our own solutions, right? And that's what gave birth to Canza Finance.
Canza Finance. Yeah. Right, we wanna ask Deji to say something. First of all, Deji, hello. Where were you born? Okay. But, and even before he answers, there's always this fight between
Cameroon and Nigeria.
Food,
oh yeah,
Cameroon Pepe.
Yeah. He already knows who have the best jollof. He's been to my house. He's eaten at jollof before.
You see, guy will say it. Nigerian pepper is hotter.
I love how Africans.
Since we're in Africa's talking
food.
Headquarters and just talking.
Yeah. But yeah, so who is Deji? I mean, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, no worries. So my name is Oya Deji Oluwaya. I was born and raised in Sydney, Australia.
Oh, nice.
So I left there when I was young to Alabama in the US. My dad is a professor. I taught at the University of Technology, Sydney. Then moved to Alabama A&M University. So I finished my last couple of years of high school there, and then I also did my bachelor's degree at Alabama A&M University. So during school, I did like a lot of CompTIA, CCNA type of test, network engineering certificates, just so I can basically have that extra. At that time you want to add more stuff to your resume, right, and be more skill set heavy. So I did those early on. And then I graduated from there, and I was like, okay, I gotta get a job, right? It's the time is to be a grown man. So I got accepted into the AT&T Network Leadership Program. Yeah. So I moved from Alabama to Atlanta, so pretty close, like 3.5 hour drive. So I migrated over there, and then I just started getting into network engineering, much more heavy when you're in the 24 hours a day type of thing. So from there, network engineering, AT&T. Like I said, my parents are African, so they are born and raised in Nigeria. Yeah. Osun State.
Osun.
Yeah, my guy. But out there, so both my parents are Yoruba, so they have an interesting background themselves. But they migrated. They went to school in the US. They went to do their PhDs in Australia, and then that's where I was born and stuff. So I'm the youngest of four. But when I went to there, I had to do my master's, right? So they tell me that the bachelor's degree is the new high school degree type of thing. It's getting much more competitive. So I started at Georgia Tech. They had a new online program there. I did 1 year of their like SDN networking, software-defined networking, and then I also did like healthcare informatics. And then from there, I was really big. My dad's very big into research. So that program didn't have a research component, so I transferred back to Alabama A&M. And at that time, so the thing about the US, they teach you all these good things. US is very good. It has its pros and its cons, but the pros is that everybody has a fair shot, right? As long as you understand the process, you understand this structure, then you can go from 0 to 100. So at that point, I was learning a lot about 401ks and personal finances, because that wasn't really taught, that financial literacy piece. So at that point, I knew I had network engineering background, and then I was learning a lot about finance personally. So that led me into YouTube, it led me into books, but the YouTube video, I think I had an ad or something, and then that when I first heard about Bitcoin. So from that part, I was like, okay, I'm going to do my master's thesis on. So it's called the Network Analysis of the Bitcoin Network. So I did that in fall 2015, and then I defended that in spring 2016.
Okay.
So I've been down the rabbit hole, digital assets, blockchain, and telco ever since. So that's pretty. And then Pascal mentioned the story about the AT&T labs and things like that. So that's where all the entrepreneurship stuff comes from.
Actually, I was those important story he left out, right?
Yeah.
Like so Deji kind of won me into the crypto space, and
Okay.
it probably took about like 6 months. And first, he started from like the technology standpoint, saying, "Hey, decentralized technology is going to be the next big thing."
Yeah.
And crypto is gonna be the next big thing. And I was like, crypto, that's not gonna work. The central bank is gonna kill this thing, right? And I just kept bringing a lot of mandates that are gonna stop. And one day he was just like, "Hey man, just come check how much I made on Ethereum."
Oh.
And I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, I need to start
I need
trading."
to join this thing, right?
So I forgot about all the regulatory stuff. It was like, how do I make more money off what I put in Ethereum, right? But then that was really important because we learned one of the biggest lessons. Then we learned, I think we started to get a sense of like, how does the market sentiment affect every other thing, right? I think a lot of crypto traders, I would say they're like very good researchers. You need to know, you need to be able to like think forward. You need to look at the information and project it, right? And make a decision if it's going to affect the price upwards or downwards.
Yes.
And we started building those skills, right before I think the 2017 boom. So
Yeah.
So the boom was good to you guys in some form.
Everything is
everyone.
cyclical. Everything has its cycles.
yeah, I mean, I'll be very, very honest, right? It was really good, right? But then it was really, I think the following year was really bad, right? Which was the same indication with the market.
Yeah.
So, in the bull market, everything is going up, right? So you feel like everything you're doing is right. Like I literally created a predictive model that could, pretty much you can do like hour to hour predictions based off multiple different sentiments, right? Social media, all type of stuff.
Okay.
But just because the market was trending up, right? So it didn't matter what type of technology I was building. It was already going up.
biased.
Yeah.
So there was some like, I would say the reality was very it was like a disguised, right?
Okay.
And I think that's what took a lot of us took a hit in the following year, because we're still stuck with those mechanisms that we've entrusted, but then the market doesn't care, right? The market is doing what the market does. So
So I have a question before even we go deep in the crypto situation. What does Canza Finance do, and what can it do for? What's your target market? What can Canza Finance do for someone? And then now basically we'll talk a little bit about the crypto ecosystem, because it takes a miracle right now, I think, especially in the last couple of cycles, to run a Bitcoin or a crypto or a blockchain based startup. I think
Right.
so some people have been butchered.
yeah.
So I mean, what does Canza Finance do? What can it do for someone? Is it as an institution or as an a normal guy on the street? Yeah.
Yep. I think Deji can take
Deji can take it away, man. Okay, Deji, tell us.
So basically, Canza Finance is just really bridging traditional finance and then decentralized finance together.
Okay.
So what the mission is for sub-Saharan Africans to have access.
Yeah.
Just so based off what I said earlier with all that thesis, I knew that the U.S. side, the West, they were getting the first movers advantage to understanding, the financial gains and the capital of it. And I was like, okay, the technology part is still there,
Yes.
but it can really be applied towards the continent of Africa.
Yes.
So I really wanted to make sure that we encompass all types of suites of products that will just give the ability to access. You don't have to buy Bitcoin. You don't have to sell, but at least you can have the option.
Yes.
Right. So in the US, you can have the option to go into the stock market, etc. There's so many barriers for sub-Saharan Africans or anybody on the continent to even get into that room. So Canza Finance embodies that cross-border transactions, OTC aspects, decentralized finance, yielding and borrowing and lending, and then also the mobile phone that adapts to decentralized applications.
Yes.
And that's why we're here about the USSD tech that we've built around different products and money Legos to incorporate.
Yeah, if I could like even summarize that in a sentence, I think Canza Finance is trying to provide the experience, right, of I would say global banking to emerging markets,
Okay.
right? So now you can think of like you just ask the question, right? Like, for example, my grandma stay in a remote area.
Yes.
She doesn't have a bank account, right? So she's unbanked.
Yes.
And because of that, with the current traditional services that exist, right, she's excluded from that. So what can she really do? What does she have access to, right? She's still in the cash base. She has the cash based ecosystem, right? And funny enough, my grandma is not going to be the only person like that, right? Because in order for her to be like that, they have to be other people that kind of are like that, right?
Support that
She has
ecosystem
to
to
trade, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just my grandma, it's a lot of people in these areas, right? So what does it mean if those people can somehow, right, through their mobile device, which right now smartphones are very popular, you know, in these areas, right, and applications as well. Right? I communicate with my grandma on WhatsApp, right? What if now those people had avenues, right, where there could be a technology they can swap or they could exchange value, right, for cash to crypto, and then now have access to tools that can enable them to buy Apple stocks,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So essentially, you've created this new bridge, right, of upscaling their experience, right, to someone that is maybe in a more developed country, right, that has a platform where they can log in and have access to stocks they can buy with their cash, right, directly from their bank account. So I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do, right? When we start off from the problem space, understanding the problem, understanding the scale of the problem,
Yes.
before we dive into the solution space. But when we do dive into the solution space, right, like Deji mentioned, one of our biggest objectives, right, is to make sure that like we're not left behind, right?
As a continent.
Exactly. And so when we do provide solutions, they have to be up to par with other global solutions.
Yes.
Right? So that's essentially.
So you
what
mentioned the
Canza
ecosystem.
Finance is.
So for example, of course, if you're looking at the average, let me say, agege bread seller,
Yeah.
or in Kenya, they call it mama mboga. So so their ecosystem right now is cash, heavily cash. Which
Exactly.
means
Yes.
they have the cash, they find someone else with cash, and people buy and sell through their ecosystem with cash.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you guys would definitely want to be or are building is a support system for the crypto ecosystem through Canza, right? So maybe you can talk about how are you looking at that, your agency plan, or not necessarily in details, in case it's a bit,
Okay.
yeah, it's
No, for sure, I can touch on that exactly. So starts off with a story, and then I'll dive into it. 2017, I go back to Nigeria. I visit there once a year since I've been 19, and I'm talking to basically a currency exchange agent. His name is Idris. So Idris, any type of we change in dollars, US dollars. We go to him. There's a spot in Ibadan, Nigeria. It's called Sabo. So it's where all the Muslims are at, where they do all like basically. And I look at from my point of view, it's like a Black Wall Street. Everyone's just like dollar naira, British pound number, 411, 119. It's just like it was just like a trading desk or something, but it's in person. So I told him, he has a lot of things. Oh, we're buying cars in Dubai, we're doing this, and at that time we were buying a house in Lagos. So I was talking to him. I said, hey, my friend, this was when I was really hot off the 2017. This is really before everything really cranked up. It was in April, and my research was just a couple months ago. I said, you should start looking into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
okay.
He said, Deji, blah, blah, blah. You know how it is, right? If it doesn't affect you right, then you're not going to see, right? You have to have a certain, a technical acronym or in-depth type of interest.
Okay.
And then literally 6 months later, I get WhatsApp message, Deji, how far? Bitcoin, what's happening? After the, and so we understood that, okay, there's a market demand for this. So just through that WhatsApp, we've just been creating that relationship with that agent decentralized network, right? Because they move cash. They move cash from here to here to here to Cairo. They have different all these moving money to Mecca and things like that. So they have this traditional network of moving. So we use that agent. We built a community with all agents. Each just gave us access to so many different people.
Yes.
And then we started building around this peer-to-peer because cryptocurrency, it comes from the basis of the peer-to-peer network.
Yes.
So we looked at it like, hey, this is the physical version. So now we can build, and like I said, these money Legos and these tools around peer-to-peer markets.
Yes.
So that's where we started bringing technology on top of like a layer one infrastructure of agent bankers.
Yes. Actually, we need to bring context to guys who don't know what happens. But what you're talking about also happens in East Africa, where we have the Hawala. They're called Hawala.
Hawala.
Yep.
Yeah, Hawala.
Yeah, so basically, like, there's just cash that people exchange. Maybe in Kenya it's not so big because of regulation, but maybe it should be allowed because it's a way of creating employment. There's so many of these guys.
Yeah.
But what I hear from you is that one, their pace of learning anything to do with money is very fast, which means they can even drive crypto adoption.
Oh, yes.
Because as long as your Hawala or your M-Pesa agent can do your crypto transactions with you, that's very interesting.
So you even have to think, right? Because like this trade has existed such a long time ago, right? Like during the gold trade, and I think
From the butter trade.
Exactly.
It's really what you're saying is that this is as African as it gets.
I think it's probably like the strongest financial system that has been overlooked over time that is going to always survive, right? That's one thing I learned about the
It's just that the assets change. Whatever is being exchanged.
The asset will change, but the network will keep on,
still there,
right? And a lot of people have to understand this FX agents, especially in Nigeria, right? We don't get to interact a lot with them because it's just, hey, Apoki, I need like this amount of dollars, so they do the exchange.
Yes.
But in the back end, they're very, very sophisticated.
Very sharp.
Okay.
They have to manage balances. They have to facilitate high frequency transactions. They have to build relationships among each other. They have to build relationships with companies. They have to build relationships with banks. So
trust.
They have evolved so fast, right, over time, right, where like for us, like fintechs, right, trying to do the same thing, it's kind of like a joke, right? Because like they could work with us, right? But they've understood that like their business is not always going to work how it's working now. The asset might change. There might be new laws that might make it hard. So now they're a lot more open to working with startups and new technology. But it's actually quite interesting that we don't know what the Hawala system is worth today.
Oh,
nobody knows what.
So that is an
put a tag on
unbanked
it.
sector.
Exactly.
Yeah.
it's unbanked, but it is the bank.
Exactly.
It is the bank that your grandmother understands.
Yeah. They issue loans, by the way. Like the FX agency, they issue loans to businesses, right? So
That's what I was going to touch on is that the Canza would do a very big emphasis on localization infrastructure.
Okay.
So that's one thing that me and Pascal were to do. We didn't want to come from, we went to school in the US and et cetera, and bring like a square into a circle. We want to build around the local part. So what you mentioned is that if your natural behavior is to go to one of these currency agents, let's build tools around that. So you don't have to change your natural behavior, so you can still do your everyday business.
right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had a question, Pascal and Deji, and this is a bit to from your background. Like you were born in Africa, but you went to US. You were never born in Africa, but you came back to Africa. There are a couple of actually Black Americans and Africans in the US who actually are planning to come back, either to invest or to innovate, or even to settle back.
Right.
But they don't know how to do that at all. So how would you like help them like figure that out, such that, because Africa is like the next big economy per se, and that's catching up, and tech is leading the way.
I'll dive in. I'll dive in first. I'm gonna say funny market, but it's a mindset thing. I think if you really want to move back, you're gonna move back. It's just like if I really want to get coffee right now, I go grab some coffee. So it's something. It's just like a choice. If you're really gonna jump over that hurdle, definitely it's to me it was way more reward here. I think that's one of the reasons why we left the corporate American system, is because that we knew that the opportunity even to move up is just all this extra, and I could come to Africa. You've really built. It's more innovative for entrepreneurs. The possibilities are much more from our point of view. But I think, it's going to be challenging. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, I've been enjoying Kenya. There's power everywhere I go.
Nice.
But like, when I moved back to Nigeria, there's a lot of things, right? My identification number, getting a SIM card, and when you're coming from a westernized type of scenario, it took me maybe the first months, but after that, I just deleted it. Because I knew that if I really want to build products for these people, I have to be of these people, right? So like me waiting in line, me sitting down on the bench for 6-7 hours, I needed to understand of like the frustrations of what everyday people go through, and then build that resilience, because then I can relate that towards the products. But I think the opportunity is here, so it's really, you want to take the challenges. Yes, you're going to see hurdles of just of understanding Okadas, motorbikes, anything like that, but it's life. To me, I look at life as about experiences. So I like to enjoy and experience everything. So
for sure.
it's just taking the leap. It's worthwhile. So
I think in my opinion, it's important for them to understand that like Africa is home, right? Like for me, first time in Nigeria, I was kind of hesitant, right? I was scared. Everybody was like, "Oh, be worried about security, be worried about this, be worried about that." But to be honest with you, I felt at home. I felt like I was back in the States. I felt like I was, even when I'm in Kenya here, I feel like I'm at home. When I was in Togo, I felt like I'm at home, right? So first it starts off with, because you're going to have to create a comfort right there, and you may call it home, right? So it's important for you to understand that there are people ready to receive you, and the communities that will be so happy to see you, right? And that is like the first thing, right? If you're able to have a mindset that I'm going home, then you're gonna do what you need to do to make it home, right? So that's the way I look at it, and I think it's actually, believe it or not, the music industry is helping us a lot with that.
Very true.
Like I said, when I met Deji in the height of like Davido's first or second album release. The club scene in Atlanta had changed.
Wow. Okay.
Like, because back then it was a lot more of like Caribbean music was more at like the forefront, right? And then now African music became kind of at the forefront. And so now a lot of DJs playing African music, a lot of events, right, that were now bringing Africans together, right? And then that also formed over time to like concerts where it was like African and Caribbean artists. And then now it's formed to like Burna Boy, right? Coming here and going to the US, having major concerts, and you see people from all around the world. So like the music part has helped us a lot, right? Or entertainment, right, has helped us get into that space of like feeling together, right? So it's now so easy. We have so many friends, right? Common African American friends that whenever we're going somewhere, they're like, "Hey, I'm coming," right? And they've experienced the music. They've also probably experienced the food, right? So the restaurant
Even
industry,
the dressing.
exactly.
Like
So,
last time, Davido went there with like African designers, African print, and he was interviewed about it. Imagine the perspective and the platform that actually adds. So
exactly. So we all have I feel like we all have I think there's a responsibility for us, and there's a responsibility for them. Our responsibility is to make sure that we let them know this is home, right? Come get the experience that you're looking for.